Boo! It's enough to keep going. Show where old dudes with mortgages and doctor's bills try to escape reality by talking about video games. I'm your host tonight, Swiss Guard, and I have with me two very distinguished fellows in all matters gaming. First, so Cyrus Prime, how are you doing, Prime?
I'm well. It's very nice of you to say distinguished. I don't know about that, but I'll take it. I've been
It's
called worse.
it's a nice way of saying that we've been at this too long.
Way too long. And we'll keep
Um,
going though.
yep, and we're also here with DBQ Hams. How are you, DB?
Well, as someone who just purchased a new washing machine today because 2 days ago it leaked through the floorboards down to my basement, I can appreciate the reality scares that come with home ownership and middle age. So I think that's an excellent way to start off this Halloween podcast. So
Yeah, it is. It is the eve of Halloween, October 30th. Um, and as far as another, like, just as a real quick Halloween aside, being an old fart gamer, um, I don't have as much joy for Halloween as I did when I was 10 years old. Mostly, I just view it as my wife is going to be spending a lot of money on costumes for my kids that they use for an hour and then never gets used again. So I have a
There we
very
go. There's the curmudgeon that we were all waiting for.
well,
very
Swiss,
cynical attitude.
I will join you in that as someone who stopped trick or treating in second grade because it's trick or treat, and I enjoyed hanging out at my grandparents, handing out candy and watching cable much more than walking around and getting random candy. So I'm okay
Second
with
grade.
yeah.
Wow.
I learned that I could just snack on the candy and watch some cable in town when I lived out in the country. So this is back, before streaming media and everything else. So being able
Back when
to,
there were dinosaurs and you had to walk
uh-huh.
uphill. Yeah.
What'd you say? I can't hear you. Hold on. Anyhow, but that is not why we're here. I mean,
Nope.
we have plenty of terrible stories and jokes to tell, but we are dads, so
Yeah. Listeners, if you're curious about us trying to get into the holiday spirit, be careful what you wish for, because as DB said, I think we've all embraced the dad joke and the cringe humor. So we'll try to be professional though from here on out. Okay, it's deep
hey,
dive.
on the E2KG network, we already had our holiday, right? We had it in the middle of June for our E3 extravaganzas. So we got our holiday out of the way. Let all the rest of these lay folk go ahead and put on some costumes and spend their money. We'll just sit here and talk about video games like we do every Tuesday.
Well, we're spending money too, though, this holiday. Let's not get that.
Well, but it's on us.
That's true.
So it's on ourselves. So we can justify it. We need some way to release the stresses of the day. But anyways, tonight is the deep dive. I wanted to tell DB that it wasn't a really good holiday because Sony had a really pathetic press conference and I was disappointed in it. It was like getting coal on Christmas. But anyways, the deep dive is when we chat about the news in the world of gaming. So last week we had our GX show and we talked a little bit about a lot of just what we've been playing lately. We need to get back on the pick plays schedule. So we're probably going to hit that at the end of tonight's episode because Prime had a selection and we just ignored him last week, so we didn't even bring it up.
That's fine
because he is the invisible girl.
That's right.
But this week we're talking news. I think it's been a while since we've done a deep dive, so we have actually a lot of stories tonight. First up, Prime has some financials with Nintendo.
Yes, so they had their earnings call, I believe, or today, or maybe it was yesterday. I can't remember. It's been a long week already. it's only what, Tuesday. So but yeah, so obviously Switch is still doing good. They passed 22 million units sold since last year. Excuse me. They also said that they sold more, about 5 million units within the past 6 months, which is a slight increase from last year at the same time. So it's good. Still, they're going up. So that's nice. So they're above, or actually, I'm sorry, they're doubled the sales of the Wii U at this point, and they have overtaken GameCube's total sales figure of GameCube's life cycle. So they're on
So
track.
GameCube was 21. I thought GameCube was 23. I mean, regardless, it's the fact that it's a year and a half out is still a great feat.
Yeah, according to the article here, they overtook it. So at least that was IGN's article. I don't know, maybe one of the other ones kind of broke it down a little bit more, but they didn't go into too many specifics here on IGN. So they just said they passed total figure. So
They did mention some game figures though too, and what surprised me, Mario Tennis Aces, over 2 million copies sold.
yeah, so that's
It just
good.
feels like it's flying. Well, maybe we're just not plugged in, but to that, that style of game, I don't know. It feels like there hasn't been a lot of talk about it since it came out this summer, but that's a lot of copies.
Yeah.
So if I remember right, sorry to cut you off, Prime. If I remember right, it was $1.5 million, back by the end of the summer, right? So I think a lot of that it came out in kind of a drought time. It'll be interesting to see at the end of the year where it's at now that we know where it's at now. But if it picks up any holiday steam, or if it was simply a product of a lot of early adoption.
No, yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. I mean, that was like probably the biggest release for their summer releases. I don't remember what else if anything else they released major, at least as far as Nintendo itself.
Yeah, I guess the Octopath Traveler, but
that was a surprise though that it was so well received. I think it even took Nintendo by surprise.
Yeah, that's good. And I mean, I'm sure they're going to be busting out those other sports titles, the Mario sports titles here, or at least next year maybe, like baseball, and I think they had a basketball one on the 3DS. So yeah, and then also Donkey Kong Country, Tropical Freeze sold more than 1.5 million. That kind of surprised me, just because I think that was that a not a remaster, but it was a port from the Wii U version.
Correct.
Yep, Wii U port came out in the beginning of May.
Okay, so everybody loves Donkey Kong, I guess. That's good. Zelda, they sold more than 10 million units. And well, they said Switch games have now sold more than 10 million units, and they say Zelda was in there. So I'm assuming that doesn't factor in Wii U's sales titles, which might not be all that much anyways. So, and then we had Mario Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with 11 million, and Super Mario Odyssey with 12 million, respectively. So that's good. Overall, 42 million copies of Switch software, and I'm assuming that's just for first-party titles, or they didn't really specify. They just say Switch software have sold, so that's good. So yeah, and then they're just projecting, obviously, for the coming couple months here. We got November, we have Pokemon Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu, which I'm sure is going to, it's a Pokemon game, so it's going to sell not only software, but most likely units. And then, of course, December, the big daddy of it, of them all, Super Smash Brothers Ultimate. So we'll see how that how the sales figures spike, hopefully, even more. So I don't know. Are you guys looking forward to either of those 2 or 3 titles? I guess if you want to say it that way.
Yeah, Smash Brothers, but I think it's just a Nintendo staple. So
is it more of what you're waiting for it, or is it just because I kind of have to get it because it's Smash Brothers?
I'm not like eagerly it's not like I'm counting down the days, but I don't feel obligated to buy it either. I'm gonna enjoy it, I think, when it comes out.
Yeah.
So we're not putting this in the agenda, but are we going to call the potential leak last week news, or is it's still rumor and speculation at this time in terms of?
I didn't watch it. I'm going to wait for the 42-minute Nintendo Direct
to see if they actually. Yeah, that's what I hoped, right? And this is Thursday when the Direct comes out, but my hope would be that if that leak is actual, is somewhat factual, that they do get out there relatively quickly and just give us some gameplay of those characters. So.
Now I saw a poster of one of them. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, right. That's the whole background. Kind of the Reddit, the Snapchat capture and filter and the whole kind of sourcing of somebody's LinkedIn profile and the back of a Grinch and how it must be authentic, right? I mean, so there's this whole other rabbit hole of how people are trying to determine the authenticity of that poster.
Yeah. Well, like what Swiss said, there's going to be a 40-minute or so, they say, direct on Thursday, which I'm kind of surprised it's going to be that long just on one game. I mean,
it's Smash Brothers. They're going to build. You want to build the hype.
I mean,
well, but there's also
stages, and they've talked
another
about
10 characters that potentially are coming through this leak. So there's a lot that they could, given that they spent time at E3 telling us about each character and how Mario's cape or fireball moves a little bit differently, they might be able to get 40 minutes out of brand new characters.
That's true. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what comes out of that. And I guess there's supposedly another mode that they haven't talked about yet either. So I'm assuming that might be some kind of story mode, hopefully. But
Weapon Master mode.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see.
All right, moving on. So Nintendo has some good financial news, and so does Microsoft. Do you want to pick this one up, DB?
Sure, they do, right? I mean, after all the hard time that we've been giving Microsoft in terms of not having the games to justify the exclusivity or the console, that this year they've got their hardware revenue, Xbox hardware revenue is up and up quite significantly. So, and over the last quarter, so the last 3 months, it has grown 94% revenue, mainly with sales of the Xbox One X. And so, and this is the October. So we haven't even hit the good deals that are starting to happen on Xbox, right? The past 2 weeks, there's been $100 off Xbox S or Xbox One X if you buy Red Dead Redemption. So potentially you're getting a bundle for relatively cheap. And I'm sure there's going to be additional sales and discounts once we come into the holiday season. But so again, it's up quite a bit, and potentially it is the fact that it's really kind of the only newish hardware out there. It's newer than the Switch, and as we just saw, that the Switch has continued to sell. So there are, for gamers who are looking to upgrade or looking to get a new experience, that this is kind of the only option out there for them right now. And I think that potentially the fact that the adoption of 4K TVs has increased over this year also starts to justify maybe to more people where the X is a worthwhile purchase, or the fact that we have a little bit more of a target of not any new consoles until 2020. It gives people a little bit of a reason to go ahead and jump in on the mid-cycle upgrade. So we also know that the Xbox gaming revenue is up 44%, mainly related to third-party releases, because as we know, there hasn't been a whole lot of first-party titles coming out of Microsoft. We get Forza Horizon 4 from this month, but then we have to go back into May with State of Decay 2 and March with Sea of Thieves to get some Xbox exclusives there. And so again, they see Xbox Live users increasing from 53 to 57 million over the last quarter. So again, I think that is probably the most interesting number here, because I would read that as that's 4 million new players, where it's quite possible that you could grow Xbox Ones could sell really well, but it's to people like Prime and I who have original Xboxes who are looking to upgrade. That this is a 4-year-old machine and looking to upgrade. But potentially, it also means that they're grabbing either new adopters into this generation, or that they're getting PlayStation platform holders that are picking up a second console as well. So I think the 4 million new users is a good sign for their user base.
I'd be hesitant maybe to say that they're new users. The article phrases it as active users, and that just sounds like marketing speak to me. To maybe players are coming back.
Yeah, I think that's a very good distinction there, Swiss. That it does say Xbox Live active users. So I think you are right. It could be people who have lapsed, and whether they lapse this generation or last, it is a very deliberate word choice. Good point.
Right. But I mean, it's still good news from Microsoft's perspective. People, they're gaining activity. They're gaining players. Whether those players existed before or not, things are looking up. So, Prime, do you have any? It kind of took me by surprise when I saw this article. I think I was the one that posted this in the draft agenda, just because I didn't think that there was that much demand for an Xbox One X. And do you have any? You have one. Do you have any theories why it would have been picked up so well? Do you agree with DB or have some different ideas?
I mean, yeah, he made a good point about for the 4K part, because I mean, TVs are pretty cheap now. You can buy pretty decent TVs for pretty low price, like a few $100s, two, three, four, even $400. The lower, two, 300 might not be the best in the world, but I mean, it's going to get the job done as far as the 4K. You get a little higher, you can do the HDR and stuff like that, but that's probably a big part of it too, just because they're pretty cheap now. I bought one. I don't even have a 4K TV. I just have 1080p. But I mean, it looks. I can tell the difference even on that. So, I mean, it's good for them. I mean, I was surprised, just as surprised as you were that it's doing so well. But I mean, I guess that's good. So, I mean, everything is going well. I don't understand how or why, because obviously the games aren't there. At least first party wise. I mean, yeah. I mean, I can get Assassin's Creed. Is going to look good on there, but if a person has a PlayStation, they're not going to go out and buy an X just for that. So, I mean, it's good on them though.
Well, speaking of Xbox and games, why don't you stay on the mic? And we have a story about Microsoft kind of trying to make inroads into their other gaming arm, their forgotten gaming arm in a way.
On the PC side, yes. So, the CEO during the earnings call, he announced that Game Pass is coming to PC. So that's pretty much all he said. He didn't really give any details on, how it's coming or what the details. Is it going to be every game just like it's on Xbox now, or how much it's going to be? It's $10 a month right now on Xbox. There's over 100 games right now that you can download and play. And as long as you have the Game Pass, you have access to those games. They do. Kind of cycle them out, almost like a Netflix, style subscription service. So you'll have some games, probably mostly third-party games, as far as I can tell. All the first-party stuff though that is released day and date comes on Xbox Game Pass, so you'll get it on day one with everybody else. So I mean, that's a big deal that the stuff that is out there, Sea of Thieves and Forza Horizon 4, all the I think there's a couple Forzas out there now, but stuff like that, you'll get it right away. So that's it's a good deal. And they've also, with the service, obviously they have the Play Anywhere program where, as long as it's compatible, if you buy it on Xbox, you can play it and use it on PC without having to rebuy it on the PC side. So obviously not all titles can do that. It's mostly first party. I think there's some third party stuff that's on there too, but for the most part, I believe it's just the first party titles that you can do that with. But yeah, I mean, like I said, there's not a lot of details, so we'll have to see, exactly how this is going to work. But I'm assuming it'll be the same thing as on Xbox, the Xbox platform. So we'll see how it goes.
I wonder how trimmed down it will be, right? I think the Xbox platform has a lot of third-party aspects to it, and over the past half a year, it's added some big publishers in that with Bethesda and Ubisoft. So I do wonder how much of that will end up being more indies and Microsoft itself. But I think it's great news. I think it's a good value add. I think the question will be if it is one subscription or if it's two different subscriptions, if they go the EA model where you have EA access on Xbox and you have Origin access on PC, or if it's kind of the way it is right now, right? This weekend I picked up my file from Forza Horizon 4 on the PC, right? Because I have it. through Game Pass, and so I've played it on the console. And this weekend, I just simply downloaded it, and it synced and picked right back up where I was playing it on the computer. So I think that aspect of it is really great if they can match that, so that if you can sync and switch back and forth between where you're at in your house, or the ability to grab it and go on a laptop depending on what you're playing. I think there's a lot of potential value there, and it could bring more people into whatever infrastructure Microsoft ends up trying to build within the PC end. But I also wonder, and this is how much of this is a segue into their Xfinity platform, right? That we talked about a couple weeks ago in terms of their streaming ability. And so if this becomes a hub and you get games that you can download, or you have games that you can stream all within the same interface, suddenly it may generate more users and give a little more value, or a value proposition for subscriptions then as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking that I'm glad you brought that up, because it's more interesting to me forward looking. For a long time, I've always felt like, I don't know, to get biblical, a house divided against itself cannot stand. It's always been kind of interesting how, Microsoft, I mean, PC dominates the market. You have to have a Windows. Effectively, you have to have Windows if you want to play most games on PC, right? And yet they wanted to go the console route and make inroads there. So they had these two essentially distinct platforms, and it always felt like they were much more pushing the Xbox side of things rather than the PC gaming side, and just almost leaving. Yeah, well, we're running PC gaming, but it's always been left to almost the publisher portals now, and Steam. So it's interesting. I like this article because it was, one, you see the CEO shedding light on the PC side, and two, as you alluded to, DB, there might be a merge on the horizon, or some sort of crossing of the stream, so to speak.
So now you had mentioned that DB, you had mentioned that they do have a strong third-party presence now, a little bit more than when it first started on Game Pass. We got the first division. I think there's been some EA stuff, maybe some like you mentioned, Bethesda.
I don't know that there's been any EA, mainly because EA has their own.
That's true. Maybe I'm thinking of Games with Gold.
Games with Gold, yep, certainly has
a lot of stuff, but there's third party. Now that brings up the question for me, because I'm not a big PC player anymore, PC gamer. Are game sales? I don't know if there's a comparison of like PC game sales compared to like console game sales, and I mean, obviously you have Steam, which they have like tons of indies and stuff like that. But I mean, how did like the major titles do compared, PC and consoles? I mean, is that even a thing? Is PC still dominating like it kind of did back in the day? Does anybody know?
In terms of units sold from
just sales wise, yeah.
I think it's probably got to depend on the game, right?
Yeah, and I think it's hard to judge, because a lot of that doesn't get reported. Some of that gets filtered in through NPD, but not a lot of digital sales do. So I think that is a challenge of where, in some ways, it becomes looking at user bases to get a sense of sales on PC, because we don't necessarily get that same number, or that the sales numbers for the PC edition of Destiny 2 or NBA 2K, or Call of Duty, for Black Ops 4 certainly will get factored in. But whether or not, because of a lot of proprietary platforms on PC, how much of that gets counted, I think it becomes a little more nuanced and cloudy in order to parse out those numbers.
Okay, and I'm just asking only because I wonder if they can use that to go to the third parties saying, hey, we got these, you got these PC sales, or you got these games on PC that, they kind of do kind of well. Bring it, you can bring it over here in our service, and, we'll try to get it out there to the masses. You get some more exposure. I wonder if they're kind of using that to get the third parties to come over to Game Pass both on console, I guess, and PC coming up here. So,
well, it'd be interesting to see how much of a cut Microsoft is taking versus like Steam. You know, we know Steam takes 30% off, so um, I think we had a kind of a similar discussion about why these publisher portals are becoming more of a thing with regards to that. So, you know, if Microsoft has a better deal, I can certainly see, you know, people exploring Game Pass as a developer or a publisher.
Yeah, I think that's kind of exactly the same logic that I would be approaching this with is what's that percentage, and can they undercut Steam on the PC end, knowing that they're still going to get their cut on the Xbox platform, and so they they might be able to bundle those agreements.
all right.
All right. Now we're going to get into switch gears a bit. We're going to continue on the game theme, but we're going to talk about the game, right? That came out this past week. Red Dead Redemption 2. I got this, I think Prime found this article on Gamasutra, but Red Dead Redemption 2 has made over $725 million in worldwide sales in its first 3 days on the shelves. According to Rockstar, it's a figure that means the game has achieved the, quote, single biggest opening weekend in the history of entertainment. Because when I saw that, I was like, wow, that blows, movies out of the water. And it's just, that's a lot. They do mention that GTA 5 hit 1 billion in sales in 2013, but they said they can't count it as for some reason they have to distinguish it differently because it was open on a Tuesday rather than an opening weekend thing. So I don't know. But point is, it sold a lot of copies. This is it's a big release. So
I always find those numbers interesting. I can remember back, what was it, Halo 3, where I think is the first time I really remember the games industry touting that their opening weekend sold more than, well, maybe at that time it would have been Star Wars or Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, right? I mean, that it's claiming to be the biggest media launch. Nowadays, it's happened more frequently, but still pretty significant.
yeah.
I think the question will be is what that shakes out into in terms of unit sales, and how much of that, there's 3 different SKUs, different versions of that, 60, 80, and $100 or something. So I think there is the ability to spike that up a little bit, but in terms of units sold, I'll be very curious to see how this paces with one of the greatest selling games of all time within GTA 5.
Right. Yeah, we have a few things that we can get into, and I can reveal that Agascles has purchased Red Dead Redemption 2, so we'll be talking more over the next couple of weeks, I think, about it.
His glowing review.
Yeah. Dun dun dun. But
yes, there is sarcasm in my voice.
So I've got it coming this week through GameFly as well. So hopefully we'll have 2 of us at least to talk about next week's podcast.
Right. But there's where was I going with this? You threw me off the trail.
So I'm best that.
Hold on, you gotta up your hunting skill here. Put your Deadeye strategy on and get some of those pelts over your horse.
All right, so
get back on the trail.
Okay. Well, anyway, more Red Dead Redemption. We'll talk more about the game, but we have kind of a slew of smaller stories dealing with the title, and one of them, who did I assign this to? Prime. Since you messed me up, you can talk about multiplayer.
Yes, I will. So, well, before I get to that, real quick on the last article, I'm actually kind of surprised that it was that big. I mean, I don't know, maybe that's just me. I didn't think it was going to be as huge like that. It's not a GTA. Obviously, everybody knows what has some idea what Grand Theft Auto is, even if it's like the worst, murder simulator thing, or for some of the older folk maybe, and politicians. But everybody, that's kind of in the as a Swiss likes to say, the zeitgeist. It's out there, everybody knows it. But Red Dead, it's like, okay, it's a good game. I played the second or the first one, I guess, the first Red Dead Redemption, and I liked it. But I don't know, it just came as a surprise to me. That's
Well, I can say that I think it's just because it's Rockstar, it's pierced the public consciousness. So there's a guy at my work. He doesn't own a system now. I remember talking to him one time, and he's like, back, however many years ago, he liked playing Assassin's Creed or something. But he's he's a dad and he works and whatever. And he mentioned to me, he's like, if I can convince my wife, I'm gonna buy an Xbox just so I can get Red Dead Redemption 2. I'm thinking about it. He was trying to talk himself into it, and so it was interesting because I wouldn't have thought he would have known about it, but it's out there and it's Rockstar, so it, as you mentioned, like, yeah, it's a surprise that we always kind of compare it to movies because that's what makes headlines, like on the news shows. But the people that are setting the agendas on the news shows probably aren't gamers. So, should we really be surprised anymore that these games are pulling, million, almost $1 billion like in one weekend? I mean, and outpacing in Hollywood at this time. It's just, you know, you're getting 60, 70, 80, $90 a pop, as DB said, instead of what? How much are you going to spend on the ticket sales for Star Wars when it comes out on opening weekend? $20, right? Uh, so, or for you just personally, it'd be $10. So I can see, as far as entertainment and return on investment, we'll talk about that a little bit, but I don't know. It's definitely, I think, something that we probably need to really get into is how much video games are a thing now, that it's not just oh, by the way, this game's out.
Yeah, I think that is there's a lot to unpack there. And I think one of the first things is I think about Red Dead is kind of the media saturation of it, right? This is something I saw advertised on a Sunday afternoon during NFL games. Right? That doesn't happen a lot. Call of Duty gets that. There was Destiny 1 got a little bit of a push at one point in time, but
Assassin's Creed, yeah.
yeah, right, getting a lot of video game play in there has not historically happened, and potentially it's going to happen more, as you're talking about, Swiss, and whether that is based on a franchise or the fact that the audience of people who play games has continued to expand or mature, and that people have had the ability to grow with those games, and so that the market is bigger than it's ever been before. It's maybe a factor in why the Xbox One X has grown as well, is that and maybe there are people who the social media and zeitgeist penetration of things like Fortnite suddenly make open the door to other gaming experiences as well. And so I'll be curious to see if this is another page in the expanding universe of games as social pop culture and media experiences, or if this is a spike because it is by the makers of Grand Theft Auto.
Do you have
Uh,
something to add, Prime?
I was just gonna say, as a tangent, because you know how we like to do that here. Um, you know, Rockstar seems to be right now locked in with Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead for the last, like, whatever, 10 years or so. Um, do you see them trying to do anything different? Like, these two games. Well, even this game's only been out for a few days or like a week or so, whatever. Do you see them, having to be locked in Grand Theft Auto or Red Dead Redemption every whatever 3 4 year 5 years that they release games, because obviously they're rock stars, so they have this long period of time that most publishers don't have, that they can actually sit down and work on a game. Do you think they can go out and do something different now? I guess there's kind of a precedent with Bethesda. They're kind of locked into Elder Scrolls and Fallout.
Well,
for a
I
while
mean,
now.
even Bethesda's doing a new IP, right?
Well, that's what I was gonna
They've
say.
already
Yeah, because
said,
now they're doing Starfield, I think, right?
right. Yeah, and
Um,
they've said that Elder Scrolls 6 isn't coming out before Starfield.
right.
It's going to be years before we see Elder Scrolls 6. So, um,
And before you go on, the only reason I asked that is because Rockstar, they're well, I guess Bethesda is owned by what, ZeniMax, but you never really hear ZeniMax saying, "Hey, you can't do this, you can't do that." But Rockstar they're a part of 2K, right? If I'm correct, and or not really? Are they separate?
So I'm gonna say that I believe that that 2K is their publisher, but
Okay, they're
how
not owned
much
by them.
Rockstar is owned by 2K, uh, you know, I would guess that they've got enough to control their own shares, or they're a private enough company that they don't have to worry about that. But they have a publisher agreement with 2K.
Okay, I always thought they were owned by them.
Well,
So.
you keep talking, and I'll start looking.
Okay, so well, I mean, that was just gonna be my thing. If they are owned by 2K, so 2K can be like, guys, just kind of stick with this, Red Dead, GTA for the next, forever. I mean, obviously, I don't know. Maybe they are kind of separate because obviously they do take, 4 to 5 years to release a game, and they don't have anybody to answer to. If they did, I'm assuming they'd be like, we need it, faster, and a faster turnaround. So I
Yes,
don't know.
2K Interactive does own Rockstar Games.
Okay.
It is one of their labels. So, but I guess I'll say that unless Red Dead Redemption Online doesn't get an uptake the way that GTA Online has, I don't know that they would ever have to expand. This is a game, and we've got stories about not only the multiplayer piece, but we've got stories about the amount of time and money that this game and sweat that this game took to create. That they started it 8 years ago. That this is under their new model where they are bringing in all their studios to work on this together. So it's not just Rockstar San Diego doing it like it was back for Red Dead Redemption, the first one. So if they can successfully create an online platform that continues to generate money hand over fist, then whether or not they need to expand into other IPs, I don't really know. I don't know that they would have to. Um, so that I guess I'm going to take that stance is they're making plenty of money just doing Grand Theft Auto Online. If
Yeah.
they get modern day and they get old west online mayhem, that may be enough for them to sustain.
yeah, I mean, going from GTA 5's release to Red Dead Redemption 2 is 5 years, right? I mean, that's a long time in game development circles. That's like, you know, two uh two releases, I think. Usually some games 3 to 4 years, maybe it's a little closer, but
So, but I
we're
think you're
not
right. But then think about all the stories that we've done here in the last 2 years about Grand Theft Auto still being in the NPD top 10, right? That this is
right.
not a franchise that has stopped selling, where they may feel like they need to create other properties to generate those sales.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Like there's nothing to make Rockstar feel like they have any impetus to put something new out there in the next, couple of years. I mean, they went 5 years and the whole time they were raking in cash. So I don't, as far as just whether or not you think people will get intellectually or intellectually is not the right term, uh burnt out on GTA, and then like after Red Dead Redemption 2 in another few years they come out with GTA 6 or something. If people will be burnt out from that, uh I don't know. I feel like it'd be nice to maybe see something new rather than just another sequel. But I think that I think whatever they do is going to be an event, and they're going to make a lot of money just because they're rock star. It's going to take a lot to dislodge them from the lofty perch they put themselves on, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think like consumer wise, because it is such a kind of a long stretch between each game that I don't think people will get burnt out on the games. But I guess I'm thinking more of the people who, the developers, creatively, do they want to keep doing, GTA and Red Dead, every few years? I mean, I guess because they've done it twice already now, or more than twice with GTA. I mean, now I don't know if it's the same, like the same exact crew,
Well,
that always does these, but
yeah, from time to time, I think you hear about like design, like the leads and stuff, kind of wanted to do new projects. And this dovetails into our final story pretty nicely. From my perspective, having been a software developer at a company where my software was handled by lots and lots and lots and lots of developers, you are a small cog in a very, very big machine. So, I mean, well, yes, you're working on Red Dead, like there's people there. It's not like they get some grand, you know, uh, able to span the entire title. Like they're focused on very, very narrow slices of a very giant pie. So, can they get burnt out? I think even if they get to go from one aspect of a Red Dead Redemption or one aspect of a GTA 5 to another, they're still getting some fresh design choices, right? I mean, I think with Breath of the Wild, there were teams that were devoted to um, specific dungeons, you know. So the guys that designed whatever this area didn't have any effect on the other areas, so there's still room for you to, I guess, keep things fresh. But I think the real question is not the content, but the time you put into it, which is pretty much leading into our next story from Kotaku, where they said, what's the title? More and more game makers are talking about crunch. So I guess this comes on the heels of Red Dead Redemption 2, but they did a lot of there was some crunch, I guess, leading up into towards the end there for the
Some crunch, right?
yeah,
So
for the year
this is where leading up to the end, if you mean a year
of
prior
19
to, or
weekends and
18 months prior
yeah.
to, right? I mean, I think that, so this is a series. This is Jason Schreier, right? This is the Blood, Sweat, and Pixels author. This is the Kotaku writer who unearthed a large essay on the failed development and resurrection around the original Destiny. This is a 10,000 word treatise on a pretty investigative story. He talked to 90 different people, or at least had references from 90 different people, and some of that is because this story has been developing over the course of time. Uh, the last 3 weeks, right? There 2 weeks ago, New York Magazine had an article where one of the Hausers was quoting as saying, "Yeah, that there's a 100-hour week crunch, and we've been the writers, we've been at this for 100 hours a week," and then got some pushback out on social media and in the games media in terms of crunch. Then came back out to say that, oh, that's just the writers and it was a certain period of time during it. And then Rockstar lifted their kind of traditional ban on their employees talking to and posting on social media, and did it for some employees but not all. And so then you had people on both positive and negative stories coming out. And so this article comes on the heels of all that, which means that Jason Schreier's had access to a number of people, many of who withheld their identity because the stories they're telling may may make it pretty easy to identify who they are. But also, Rockstar set Jason Schreier up with, brought him in, set him up with a couple of video calls with a handful of current employees, while there was a PR rep in the room, and he had the opportunity to ask them questions. So a really interesting kind of journalistic pitch here in terms of trying to get at the honest truth in here, and how much of this is a cultivated story that Rockstar might be trying to tell as well.
So these crunch stories, like they're nothing new. I mean, how long ago was it that we had the EA wife? Do you
Yeah, that's
remember?
EA Wives was mid 2000s. Then you
Right,
had Rockstar San Diego Wives right around months before
2010,
Red Dead
the first
Redemption
Red Dead.
came out. Yep.
There's a quote from in the article, like, if you left early on a weekday or a weekend, you'd get dirty looks, said one from the Rockstar San Diego. Uh, they worked an average of 70 hours a week during the first Red Dead Redemption. You'd feel the stare down, and sometimes you'd see it as you were leaving. There was this culture of, if you don't put in the hours, you're not worth working here. So I think that gets to the pretty much the crux of it, and why there's a part of me that, like, we hear these stories come out, and then we always hear, oh, it's getting better, it's getting better, it's getting better. But the people that want to develop games are in it because they're passionate about developing games and they want to be a part of it. And the corporate hierarchy is using that enthusiasm against them. So they're saying, if you don't want to work here, someone else will. And, they're going to squeeze as much out of you as they can, because the employees, the industry's kind of letting them. At some point, you have to walk with your feet. And yeah, writing tax software may not be as thrilling, but you're going to be a lot healthier if you're only having to work a 40-hour week rather than a 70 or 80. And I don't understand why it keeps happening, because I don't understand how working 80 hours a week can. You're just going to be introducing bugs as fast as you're fixing them. You know what I mean? Like, you're not getting the best from the employees for the 80 hours. So I don't know. I
Well, and I
find it
think
very unethical. It's unethical.
yeah. Okay. So I'm glad we're talking about this because I think there's a lot here to potentially talk about. I want to before I saddle up next to you and agree with you on the unethical piece, I want to say about the introducing bugs piece. Right. I haven't necessarily even thought of it that way, but to hear that from you as somebody in the development cycle, not necessarily of games but of software, who's been through crunch and had to deal with that from just a software perspective. But there's stories in this article where there may be people who their specialty is character design, or they're working on the skyboxes or certain animations, and if they were done with something, they were then encouraged rather than to use their skills for something else or to be done with their 50-hour work week, was to then do QA testing on Grand Theft Auto Online. Right? It became not about what their skill set was, it was about the amount of time that they were there. And I think you're right. There is some of that kind of culture that fosters that, and whether that's I would say it's probably not even unique to Rockstar. It just happens to maybe be easier to cultivate at Rockstar because of the hype and profile around those games. Just as we were just talking about how big this sells. But I do think you're right, Swiss, in terms of what this means for an industry. In an industry where there's not any type of protective practices or regulations around this. A month ago, we had conversations about Telltale and the work conditions and overwork aspects there. And here now we're hearing this from Rockstar in an even stronger degree. And I think there's another piece in that overwork is, if you left the company, right, and this is a practice that's not unique to Rockstar, right? If you left the company during the development, the 8-year development of this game, you do not get any credit within the game itself. That they did now post a website with all people that have worked on the game that have left, how long that website stays up. But thinking about it,
that's interesting.
no,
Sorry.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just going to say, from an employee perspective, or somebody who left to go find another job because maybe they are trying to be a tax accountant, a tax software or whatever, they don't necessarily have anything to show for their work, if other than other than what they say on their resume, if they're not getting credit for whether it's a scrapped failed game that gets shuttered or a game where they've left halfway through and don't get any credit for.
When you mentioned that, I didn't know that. So that's interesting. And my first thought jumped to the sports world, where a guy's on your team for 3 weeks and you trade him away. Your team goes on and they win the Super Bowl. Because he was on the team for those 3 weeks, he's going to get a Super Bowl ring. I think pretty much that's kind of a common thing.
Is that what happens? I mean,
yeah, I think if you've played for the team at some point in the season, I think that it's customary to give you a ring. Those are the rings I think that end up on the auction market a lot. So whenever you hear about somebody buying a Super Bowl ring, they're not getting Tom Brady's Super Bowl ring. They're getting the equipment manager or the guy that was there for a week or two and got cut, who would rather, they didn't really feel a part of it, so they get the money for it. So yeah, that to me but that makes sense. Like, I think that's a more polite thing to do. I don't know, acknowledging the fact that you were part of the team at some point. So it's just, I mean, it's unethical, but while it's developers are enabling it because like I said, they want to be a part of that. Like, I'd want to make games if I could. But I know that, it wouldn't be good for my family. So I'm not going to try to break into the industry.
I think there's a lot of industries that are like this in terms of that foster to a single or somebody without a family or other commitments, and the ability to put in those long hours, and whether it is in arts and performing arts, or if it is in development or in the sports world as somebody who's trying to make a go of it, through the European League or Arena League football or something like that, right? Where you're throwing everything you have into the creation of something. It also is the same in politics and on campaigns. And as somebody who worked at 80 to 100 hours during college and after college on campaigns, it's possible, but then it also becomes, how long is that sustainable, and what does that do to an industry if that's how you're where your labor market is made out of. I think it's also one of the reasons why we have so few kind of high profile designers in our industry of gaming, is because of the potential burnout or the lack of getting recognition or having things attributed to their work, so that we only have a few people that we can kind of rattle off by name who still exist in the industry.
Prime, did you have any thoughts on the crunch story?
No, I mean, you guys pretty much you pretty much hit it on the head. The one thing I got from the article, which I guess I just didn't really think about before, is how they mentioned that crunch can happen pretty much any time, during the project, not just at the end. And I guess I could see that. I mean, not that I approve of it, but hey, if the say like the shader or somebody is like waiting for like a certain piece of art, then those art people have to get going and and get stuff out. So it kind of makes sense, but I didn't even think about that in my head. I didn't think about it could just happen anytime. And just to joke a little bit here, Bethesda must be working their people to the bones because there's all kind of bugs in their games. So I don't know what's going on in that place. I'm surprised we don't hear more from them.
See, and I'd say probably the fact that there are those bugs means that they're pushing something out before it's gone through and burned out, how many different studios in QA testing. It's potential, right? I'm sure that Bethesda has crunch, and I'm sure that we'll hear some stories around it as well. So I've been wrestling with this from kind of a philosophical way over the last week after reading this, and I kind of want to throw this out to you guys. So what do we do about it, right? I'm glad that we're talking about it, and it's good to talk about, but what do you do as a gamer. And the Schreier article even talks about this. Is he asked the developers who were reporting to him about, so should people boycott this? And what they're saying is no, don't boycott the game, because our bonuses are tied to it, and if it doesn't sell well, we're going to even get less money than we did. But going back to the story about Xbox One X selling and thinking about next generation, games are not going to get any cheaper, any less graphically intense, or even simpler to produce in terms of big AAA types of gaming experiences. That only kind of feeds into this model of it's either going to take a long time or it's going to take a lot of human hours thrown into it to create something in 4K assets and giant open worlds. Is that sustainable? Is that something that we want, or is this kind of is it a reason for me to think about, well, what are those indie games out there that I want to support and throw my money that way rather than continue down the AAA train?
That's an interesting question. Do I
Yeah,
feel responsible?
Well, I mean, like DB said, I mean,
you boycott, you create a telltale.
Right. And then, people are don't get paid the extras and stuff like that. And I guess I was going to bring back, what are the two guys that left the Call of Duty series back in the day?
Vince Campanella, yeah.
Or, yeah.
Right, for Respawn?
Yeah. And I guess one of their things was, out of all the things that came about, but one of the things was, the money that they didn't get, the bonuses that they were, promised. And, how can the companies give a bonus if, obviously it doesn't sell well and stuff like that? I mean, obviously this is EA, I think at the time, or no, I'm sorry, Activision. So obviously they would have had the money, but, there's obviously these smaller companies that, obviously might not be able to, pay it out because they didn't make the money that they were supposed to. Whether that's because of, people boycotting or not, but I mean, just,
or you get stories of where bonuses are tied to Metacritic scores, right? And then it's they may have put in 6 years worth of work, but if the game design or the model of what the industry is looking for has shifted, those reviews may not be high, and then it's a really difficult economic model that's all kind of strung together, and the fans and the gaming industry is woven into to those economics of it.
I guess my question is, why didn't we hear about this? We didn't. I mean, we've heard some stories, I guess, in the past few years about this, but why hasn't it come out more? Is it more of a maybe the employees shaming the other employees so they wouldn't talk, or was it maybe even a contractual thing, like that it was in their contract that they had to, maybe they didn't have to work themselves to the bone, but they had to put in a certain amount of hours or something like that? I mean, I just don't get. I guess I just don't get like why now all of a sudden it's coming out. Pretty much from everywhere that people are talking.
There's probably something to do with, while the game's in development, employees don't feel they want to keep their job, and now that the game's been released, I think some of that the sort of Damocles has kind of been removed in a way, because the project's kind of, I don't want to say it's not at an end, but they've hit that major milestone, and so maybe the repercussions are no longer as dire if they get caught for speaking out. But I think there's also other aspects to it. I don't want to like necessarily play the blame the victim game, but I definitely think that there's probably some pride in the fact that, well, I worked this hard on this game, and you can take some good from that, like you're dedicated and everything, but you have to weigh it against your sanity and your health. You know what I mean? So I'm sure that there's been, peer pressure is a lot stronger in the run up to before it's been released and whatnot. So I'd say it's probably a number of factors.
No, I think you're right, Swiss, and I think there is, and Schreier's article talks about this a little bit, that there is that mentality, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? There's this cult team kind of, we're all in it together kind of struggle camaraderie that happens as you work through a stressful situation, and so there is that potential for that push, and for people to come together. There are people who are happy to do that as well, right? They feel very passionately about what they're creating, and this is part of the cost of it. Uh, I heard an interesting theory today listening to Waypoint Radio with Patrick Klepek and Austin Walker. What they were talking about, and they likened it to a number of other kind of scandals or stories that have broken, is sometimes there's kind of a watershed aspect. There's something that happens, and they pointed to the New York Magazine article where one of the Hausers said, that nobody, or he came back out to say that, no, they don't have to work 100 hours, that's not a company requirement. And so, potentially they have somebody at their top saying, all that stuff that we've been encouraging you to do, or that you felt that there was a company culture or expectation around, I'm putting on a face that says it's not valid. And so potentially there's that pushback against it, when they feel that they've, I don't know if it's as far as to feel betrayed, or the fact that if somebody's out there claiming that it's not true, the people that have experienced it maybe feel a little more empowered to speak up about what they feel is the truth.
Right. I get what you're saying. In other words, like, they want to call out what they perceive as public relations spin doctoring, so to speak. So yeah, there's like, you can't put your finger on one thing. There's so many aspects to it, and I understand the camaraderie thing. Like, I've been in that situation where you have to, with the Gasicles, working long hours on something because it was behind schedule and everything, and that's good, but it should not be abused by management. You know what I mean? You shouldn't take something that camaraderie and that willingness to go the little bit the extra mile to get something done, and try to squeeze blood from a stone. So yeah, I don't really know how to like wrap it up in a tidy little bow, and I don't know how to say as like a gamer how you can do it. It's almost like you have to look at each company to company and game to game, because yeah, so company A might be like, well, we really rushed the last month, but we got the game out on time and everybody's happy with it. And company B might have a culture of this where it's like they start off, saying, we're not going to do this, it's not company policy, we can't do it. And then 2 weeks in, they're like looking at their Gantt charts and saying, like Prime mentioned, oh man, we're behind by 10 hours, or 2 days for this. You're gonna have to work the weekend. Oh man, now we're behind by 4 days. You guys are gonna have to come in over Thanksgiving. It's just, so I don't know. There's a lot to unpack there. I feel bad for the families of the guys that and the men and women that are working that much. But
yeah, I guess the last thing I want to say is I don't think this is exclusive to Western games either. I think in some ways we hear about it more because of kind of culture, but certainly the salaryman aspect in Japanese culture, and the development there of the historic game industry is systemic, and potentially here as well.
Yeah, not just the game industry. So, all right. Well, I think we'll probably have more to talk about with this. Gascles indicated that he might want to mention something on this. So, in the coming weeks, we might. I'm sure there'll be other stories, and we'll probably touch on it again. But before we wrap up, Prime, do you have a preview for next week's GX show and the pick plays?
I don't, not in front of me, but I can talk about it real quick. Did you want me just to
What are we
review it?
playing?
Oh, what are we playing? Okay, so my thing was for my plays was with the big the big releases are coming out. Obviously, they have been coming out for the last couple months now. I wanted to go back and look at those games. And they might have been big releases maybe from last year or this past year, and kind of go back and play these games. And you can go back further if you wanted to, and just kind of go back to the games that I've dropped off of, or that we have dropped off of. And obviously, you can pick any games that you want. I had a few out there: Titanfall, Destiny 2, Battlefront 2. These are just and these are like supposedly great games. Is another thing that I mentioned. Great games for me, at least. I thought these are really good games, games I wanted to get into, and just for some reason I just kind of fell off of them. After whatever a few months or so. So I just want to kind of go back, start playing them again, and see if there was a particular reason that I stopped playing them, or if there was maybe it was just a glutton of games that I have, which is more than likely for me at least why I stopped playing them. But yeah, so that's the theme for the next plays.
I think for all of us, that's probably a big reason.
Yeah, there's like Titanfall 2. I mean, I really love that game. I had fun with it. I like the first one, and then the second one just expanded on it, tenfold, and I just stopped playing it. I don't know why. So that's definitely one of them I'm going to play. Maybe I'll go back into Destiny 2 since I gotta catch up to you guys because I don't know. I didn't like I mentioned last episode. I didn't know what the heck you guys are talking about when you're talking about the single player stuff.
I think this will be an interesting discussion, especially around this time of year as big games are coming out, and if we're thinking about, this is not simply just looking at your backlog and where are those tent poles that you've fallen away from, and giving you a chance to come back and revisit them, but also thinking about big games in the zeitgeist, right? That maybe it is, I revisited Monster Hunter as an assignment. Are there things that we haven't picked up or that we fell off of, and why? I think the why part will be an interesting conversation. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, another one I had in there. Speaking of Rockstar, I had GTA 5 in there. I just stopped playing it all of a sudden. So single player, multiplayer. I hadn't touched it in I don't know how long now.
So yeah, I think it's an interesting from this time of year perspective, just because why'd we fall off, and then compare that to these new releases and how the hype is building on them, and did we are we falling into the same cycle that we did a year ago, or in the intervening months? So it should be an interesting topic. That will be next Tuesday, November something, whatever. 6th, 2018, on Enough to Keep Going. So I think we're over the hour, so I think that'll do it for tonight. On behalf of DBQ Hams and Osiris Prime, I am Swiss Guard, and we thank you very much. Have a good evening. Happy Halloween. Goodbye.